I have witnessed plenty of strange situations throughout 15 years working as a geological engineer, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw on my property that spring. After my father passed away, a loss that made me realize I had spent too many years chasing oil fields instead of truly living, I decided I needed a complete restart, something drastic, so I took every dollar from the inheritance he left me, packed up my belongings, and bought myself a plot of land measuring 2.3 acres on the outskirts of Texas. No house, no trimmed hedges, just a lush green lot sitting right next to the Silverlake Heights residential community, but completely outside the HOA jurisdiction. To me, that was the embodiment of freedom. Comment below and let me know where you are watching from. The morning of March 14th, 2024. Changed everything I thought I knew about property rights and the limits of human audacity. I woke up at 6:47 a.m. to a sound that did not belong in my peaceful corner of the world. The grinding roar of heavy machinery tearing into the earth. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, some leftover nightmare from my days on drilling sites. But when I pulled back the curtain of my temporary trailer and looked outside, my blood ran cold. 8 construction workers in orange vests were operating an excavator on my land, digging what looked like the foundation for a massive structure. Standing in the middle of it all, clipboard in hand and designer sunglasses perched on her nose, was a blonde woman in her mid-50s who carried herself like she owned the entire county. I threw on clothes and ran outside, my bare feet hitting the cold dirt as I sprinted toward the chaos unfolding on my property. "Stop! What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, waving my arms at the excavator operator. The machine groaned to a halt, and the blonde woman turned to face me with an expression of mild annoyance, like I was a mosquito interrupting her afternoon tea. "Excuse me, but who are you?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. I planted my feet firmly and stared her down. "I'm Connor Blackwood. I own this land. I paid $127,000 for it 4 months ago. I have the deed, the title insurance, every closing document you could ask for." She let out a short laugh that made my skin crawl. "Mr. Blackwood, I don't know who sold you this property, but it belongs to Silverlake Heights HOA. I'm Sandra Whitmore, president of the Homeowners Association for 11 years, and this land was annexed into our jurisdiction back in 2019. She reached into her folder and pulled out a document, thrusting it toward me. "Resolution number 2019-47. The HOA has full authority to develop community amenities here. We're building a community clubhouse with a pool for our 847 member families. Now, we're prepared to offer you $15,000 as compensation for any confusion, but I advise you to take it quickly. Once our lawyers get involved, you won't see a penny." I stared at the document, my engineering mind already picking apart the inconsistencies. $15,000 for land I had purchased at over 8 times that amount just months ago. The math alone told me this woman expected me to roll over without a fight. Something about this entire situation felt manufactured, rehearsed, like a script she had been waiting years to deliver. I pulled out my phone and called the county clerk's office, demanding information about any building permits issued for my property. The clerk put me on hold for what felt like an eternity before returning with news that made my stomach drop. "Sir, I'm showing building permit number 2024-0847 was issued to Silverlake Heights HOA on March 11th for construction of a community recreation center at your address," I asked when the application was submitted. "March 8th, sir. 3 days before approval." My hand tightened around the phone. In 15 years of dealing with land development, I knew that building permits typically required 45 to 60 days of review, inspections, and public notice periods. A 3-day turnaround was not just unusual, it was administratively impossible unless someone inside the county office had either falsified the processing dates or bypassed every standard protocol. That kind of shortcut had a name in my industry: corruption. Back in my trailer, I went straight for the fireproof box where I kept my most important documents. My deed confirmed what I already knew. The property was designated as Lot 7, Section 12. And there in bold letters were 2 words that suddenly took on enormous significance: outside Silverlake Heights HOA jurisdiction. I had glossed over that phrase during closing, but now I understood why the previous owner had insisted on including it. Harold Pemberton, a man who had died just 2 months after selling to me, had known something. I opened my laptop and searched through old emails, checking folders I rarely touched. There it was in my spam. An email from Harold dated 3 days after our closing. The message had been flagged because his old rural internet provider used an outdated domain that most filters treated as suspicious, and the attached survey documents had triggered additional security warnings. I had never opened it. The email was brief, but chilling. Mr. Blackwood, please keep the original survey map in a safe place. The HOA tried to annex this lot back in 2019 but failed. They will try again. Trust no one from that association. I read the words 3 times, feeling the weight of a dead man's warning settling into my bones. Harold had tried to protect me from beyond the grave, and I had almost missed it entirely. Outside my window, the excavator roared back to life. Sandra stood nearby, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing at my trailer with obvious irritation. When she noticed me watching, she ended her call and approached, her demeanor shifting from dismissive to threatening. Mr. Blackwood, I've just spoken with our attorney. If you're not off this property by Friday, we'll file for emergency removal. You're interfering with a $1.247 million community investment. Think very carefully about your next move. She walked away before I could respond, her heels leaving sharp imprints in the freshly turned earth of my land. I watched her go, my mind already cataloging every inconsistency, every red flag, every thread I intended to pull until her entire operation unraveled. Sandra Whitmore had no idea that I spent my career reading geological surveys, land documents, and permit applications. She had no idea that her impossible 3-day approval had already exposed the rot at the center of this scheme, and she certainly had no idea that I intended to take back every inch of what was mine, along with whatever she was foolish enough to build on it. The next morning, March 15th, I drove to the county planning office with every document I owned stuffed into a leather briefcase. My deed, my title insurance policy, my closing statement, the email from Harold Pemberton. I had spent the entire night preparing my case, rehearsing what I would say, and anticipating every possible objection. In my mind, this was simple. I owned the land. Someone else was building on it without my permission. The county would revoke the permit. The construction would stop, and Sandra Whitmore would face consequences for her fraud. I walked into that government building believing in the system. I walked out 3 hours later, understanding that the system had already been purchased by someone else. Raymond Price was a heavy-set man in his early 50s with a firm handshake and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. As a member of the County Planning Commission, he was exactly the person I needed to see about revoking building permit number 2024-0847. I explained my situation calmly, professionally, laying out the facts as I understood them. I owned Lot 7, Section 12. The HOA had obtained a permit to build on my property. This was clearly an error that needed immediate correction. Raymond listened patiently, nodding along. But when I mentioned my deed and the words, outside HOA jurisdiction, something shifted in his demeanor. His hand moved to his desk drawer, fingers tapping against the wood in a nervous rhythm, and his eyes flicked briefly toward his phone as if expecting a message. He caught himself and turned to his computer, pulling up the county records with movements that seemed slightly too deliberate. After a few minutes of scrolling, he leaned back in his chair with an expression I can only describe as rehearsed sympathy. Mr. Blackwood, I understand your confusion, but according to our records, Lot 7, Section 12 was annexed into Silverlake Heights HOA jurisdiction under Resolution 2019-47. The building permit was issued correctly. I pulled out my deed and placed it on his desk, pointing to the bold text. Raymond's eyes darted to the document for less than a second before he shook his head, not even reading the words I was showing him. Sir, your deed may say that, but deeds are prepared by private attorneys and title companies. They make mistakes. What matters legally is the official county plat map, and ours clearly shows your lot as part of the HOA. He turned his monitor toward me, displaying a document labeled Amended Plat Map, dated August 7th, 2019. There it was. Lot 7 shaded in the same color as the rest of Silverlake Heights, as if it had always belonged to them. I felt the ground shifting beneath me. I need to see the original plat map, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. The one from before this amendment. Raymond's smile flickered almost imperceptibly, and he rubbed the back of his neck before responding. The original documents from that period are unavailable at the moment, We're in the middle of a state-mandated digitization project, and all records from 2018 through 2021 are currently being batch processed and audited. It's part of a larger initiative to modernize county archives. Those specific files should be accessible again in about 30 days. The excuse was too specific, too polished, delivered without a single pause for thought. He had anticipated this question. He had prepared this answer. I left the planning office with my briefcase feeling heavier than when I arrived. Raymond Price had not simply dismissed my evidence. He had done so with the confidence of someone who knew the outcome before I ever walked through his door. A state-mandated digitization project that just happened to make the exact records I needed inaccessible. The timing was too convenient. The bureaucratic wall too perfectly constructed. These were not coincidences. These were the fingerprints of coordination between people who had planned for exactly this moment. As I drove back toward my property, I replayed every word of our conversation, cataloging Raymond's nervous tics, his refusal to actually read my deed, the way his hand had moved toward his phone. And then I saw the construction site, and all other thoughts vanished from my mind. In just 24 hours, the project had transformed from a hole in the ground to the skeleton of a building. The foundation had already been poured using what I recognized as rapid-set concrete, the kind that cures in hours instead of days. Expensive, but clearly worth it for someone racing to establish facts on the ground. Steel framing rose from the earth like the ribs of some massive beast, and I noticed the beams were prefabricated sections, manufactured off-site and trucked in for quick assembly. Portable work lights still stood around the perimeter, evidence that crews had worked through the night to achieve this progress. Workers swarmed the site with an urgency that told me everything I needed to know. They were not building, they were racing. And there, in front of it all, stood a massive sign that made my blood boil. Silverlake Heights Community Clubhouse, coming soon. A $1.247 million investment in our future. I pulled over and watched from my truck, then grabbed my phone and started taking photographs. The sign, the construction progress, the workers, the equipment. As I zoomed in on the site, I noticed something posted on the temporary fencing, a large printed copy of the architectural plans. I got out of my truck and walked closer, pretending to be a curious passerby. The design showed a 2-story building with an L-shaped pool, outdoor lounging areas, and parking for 50 vehicles. I focused my camera on the corner of the document where the date was printed, January 15th, 2024. My mind raced through the timeline. I had purchased this land on November 18th, 2023. These plans were drawn up just 2 months later, while I was still settling into my new property. Sandra had not stumbled onto an opportunity. She had created one, designing a building for my land before I even knew I was under siege. A man in work boots and a dusty jacket caught my attention. He stood apart from the other workers, watching me with an expression that seemed almost guilty. Our eyes met for a moment, and he looked away quickly, busying himself with a clipboard. Before I could approach him, I noticed another worker pulling out his phone and making a quick call while staring directly at me. Less than 3 minutes later, a silver sedan pulled up to the construction entrance, and Sandra Whitmore stepped out with a man in a suit beside her. She had been close by, waiting, monitoring. "Mr. Blackwood, I hope you're not planning to interfere with our work." She strode toward me with cold precision. "I spoke with Raymond Price this morning. He confirmed that your little visit accomplished nothing. This land belongs to the community now." I kept my voice level. "I'm just taking pictures. Last time I checked, that's still legal." Sandra's smile tightened. "Enjoy your photographs. They'll make lovely memories of the land you used to think was yours." That evening, I called Derek Lawson, an old friend from college who now practiced real estate law. I explained everything, and Derek listened in silence before asking the question that would change my entire investigation. "Connor, you said the amended plat map was dated August 2019 in Texas. Any modification to a plat map requires a public hearing with at least 15 days advance notice under Local Government Code Section 212.015. Find the minutes of that hearing. If it happened, there will be a record, and if there's no record, then someone created that amended map illegally." I hung up feeling something other than helplessness for the first time. If Sandra thought bureaucratic delays would bury me, she had severely underestimated who she was dealing with. For the next 5 days, from March 18th through the 22nd. I became a ghost in the county records office. I arrived every morning at 8 a.m. when the doors opened and stayed until closing time at 5 p.m., methodically searching through every public document related to plat map amendments in 2019. Derek had given me clear instructions. Texas Local Government Code Section 212.015 required any modification to a plat map to go through a public hearing with at least 15 days advance notice. If the amended plat map that Raymond had shown me was legitimate, there would be a record of that hearing somewhere in these files. Meeting minutes, public notices, sign-in sheets, something. After 3 days of searching through dusty boxes and digital archives, I found my answer. There was no record. No hearing had ever taken place. I sat back in my chair at the records office, staring at the empty search results on my screen. The amended plat map that supposedly transferred my property to HOA jurisdiction in August 2019 had never gone through the legally required public hearing process. It was not just questionable. It was fraudulent from its very creation. But I needed more than an absence of evidence. I needed someone who could confirm what had actually happened during that time period. Someone who had been inside the system and could speak to what they witnessed. That evening, I called Derek and explained what I had found. He listened carefully, then told me about a man named Walter Griffin, a retired county surveyor who had worked in the planning department for over 30 years before retiring in 2021. If anyone knows what really happened with your lot in 2019, Derek said, it's Walter. Walter Griffin lived in a modest ranch house about 20 miles outside town, surrounded by the kind of peaceful countryside I had imagined for myself before Sandra Whitmore invaded my life. He was a tall, weathered man in his early 60s, with hands that showed decades of field work, and eyes that sharpened the moment I mentioned Lot 7, Section 12. I remember that lot very well, he said, settling into a worn leather chair on his porch. Back in 2019, a woman from Silverlake Heights HOA came to my office demanding that I amend the plat map to include that parcel in their jurisdiction. Sandra something, I think her name was. I told her no. There was no legal basis for it. No public hearing had been scheduled, and the property had been outside HOA boundaries since the original survey in 1987. She was furious, threatened to have me fired. He paused, a grim smile crossing his face. I retired 2 years later. Guess she finally got what she wanted after I was gone. Walter disappeared into his house and returned with a rolled-up document that made my heart race. It was a certified copy of the original survey map from 1987. After 30 years of handling boundary disputes where landowners conveniently lost their paperwork, Walter had developed a habit of keeping personal copies of every contentious survey he processed. This lot had been contentious from day one. The map clearly showed Lot 7, Section 12, with a bold notation marking it as outside all HOA jurisdictions. Take it, he said, handing me the map. If someone falsified county documents after I left, this proves what the boundaries actually were. I thanked him and asked if he remembered anything else. Walter thought for a moment. She mentioned having connections in the planning department. Said she would find someone more cooperative. Cheyenne. That single sentence confirmed what I had suspected since my meeting with Raymond Price. Back in my trailer that night, I submitted a formal records request through the county's online portal, specifically asking for the original digital file of the amended plat map rather than a standard scanned copy. When the file arrived 2 days later, I examined the embedded metadata with the precision that 15 years of geological survey work had trained into me. The document was dated August 7th, 2019, but the file creation timestamp and certification signature told a different story. Raymond Price had signed it on September 12th, 2021, according to county records I had reviewed during my search. Raymond had been assigned to lead the archive digitization project that year, giving him unsupervised access to update and certify historical plats. He had used that authority to create a backdated document and certify it as authentic. This was deliberate fraud. The discovery left me restless, unable to sleep as I turned the implications over in my mind. What would motivate a county official to risk his career forging documents for an HOA president the next morning? Still searching for answers, I dug deeper into public records, looking for any connection between Raymond and Sandra. Marriage licenses, property records, business filings, and then I found it. Raymond Price was married to Catherine Price, whose maiden name was Sandra Whitmore. A search of Sandra's husband, Robert Whitmore, confirmed he was Catherine's brother. Raymond was Sandra's brother-in-law. The corruption was not just institutional, it was family. I barely had time to process this revelation when another letter arrived from the HOA's attorney. It informed me that the deadline to accept the $15,000 settlement was April 1st, and that failure to comply would result in legal action for interference with community property. Sandra was tightening the noose, confident that her bureaucratic fortress was impenetrable. That afternoon, I spread everything across Derek's conference table: the missing hearing records, Walter's testimony, the original survey map, the metadata discrepancy, Raymond's signature, and the family connection. Derek studied the documents with growing amazement. "This is enough for criminal charges of document forgery," he said. "But, Connor, if we file now, they will have time to destroy evidence. We need to follow the money. If Sandra used HOA funds to build on fraudulently claimed land, that is embezzlement. Texas Property Code Section 209.005 gives any HOA member the right to inspect financial records within 10 business days. I frowned. "But I'm not an HOA member." Derek nodded. "No, but someone inside that organization must be unhappy with Sandra's leadership." I thought of the nervous contractor at the construction site, and I thought of someone closer to the paperwork. "I think I know exactly who to ask," I said. On March 25th, I found my ally in the most unlikely place. Brenda Sullivan had been the HOA secretary for 6 years, a position that gave her access to every document, every meeting minute, and every financial record that passed through Sandra Whitmore's hands. I had noticed her name on several of the documents I had reviewed during my research, always as the person who filed or notarized paperwork. What I did not know until I approached her at a coffee shop outside the Silverlake Heights neighborhood was how much she despised her boss. "You want to know about Sandra," Brenda said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "That woman has made my life miserable for 6 years. She forces me to work unpaid weekends, threatens to fire me if I question anything, and treats me like her personal servant. I have wanted to quit 100 times, but she made it clear she would destroy my reputation if I ever crossed her." I laid out my situation carefully, explaining that I had evidence Sandra had forged county documents to claim my land, but that I needed access to HOA financial records to complete my case. Brenda's eyes widened as I described the backdated Amended Plat Map and Raymond Price's involvement. "I always knew something was wrong with that clubhouse project," she said. "The way she rushed it through, the way she refused to let anyone see the full budget breakdown. But I never had proof of anything illegal. I told her about Texas Property Code Section 209.005, which gave any HOA member the right to request financial records within 10 business days. Brenda was a member. She could make the request legally, and Sandra would have no grounds to refuse. "If I do this," Brenda said slowly, "and she finds out I'm helping you, she will destroy me." I met her eyes. "If we do this right, she won't be in any position to destroy anyone." The next day, March 26th, Brenda submitted a formal written request for complete financial records related to the community clubhouse project. Sandra had until April 5th to comply. Meanwhile, Derek and I prepared our next move in secret. We drafted a formal complaint to the Texas Real Estate Commission alleging document forgery in the county planning office. But we did not file it immediately. Derek wanted to hold it in reserve, keeping it pending until we had financial evidence to combine with the forgery charges. The strategy was simple: wait for the financial records, find the money trail, then file everything at once, giving Sandra and Raymond no time to coordinate a defense or destroy evidence. It was a silent counterstrike, and Sandra had no idea it was coming. On April 5th, exactly 10 days after her request, Brenda received a massive package at her home. The HOA's accounting firm had spent the full 10 days compiling 847 pages of financial documents, pulling records from their archives while Sandra's assistant coordinated the physical printing and binding. The sheer volume was likely intended to overwhelm anyone who requested them, burying relevant information under mountains of routine transactions. Brenda brought the package directly to Derek's office, where the three of us spent the next 3 days going through every invoice, every receipt, every bank statement. What we found was damning beyond anything I had imagined. The project had been approved with a budget of $980,000, but actual expenditures totaled $1.247 million. The board minutes justified this excess as additional landscaping and pool upgrade, but when we cross-referenced the invoices from Timothy Banks, the general contractor, the numbers collapsed. Timothy's invoices totaled only $1.085 million. $162,000 was completely unaccounted for. I asked Brenda to request the original digital files rather than the scanned copies we had received, citing a need to verify document authenticity. When the files arrived, I examined the embedded metadata with the same precision I had used on the amended plat map. The PDF containing Timothy's invoice was created on April 2nd, 2024, just 3 days before delivery. But the invoice itself was dated January 15th. Someone had modified the records after Brenda's request. More troubling still, the financial statements showed a series of payments totaling $162,000 made to an entity called Whitmore Realty Consulting LLC for unspecified consulting services. There were no contracts, no deliverables, no explanation. The company name alone told me exactly where the money had gone. Among the hundreds of pages, one item made me stop breathing. It was a printed email buried in a folder labeled Vendor Communications. The accounting firm had apparently auto-exported the entire correspondence folder when compiling records, accidentally including internal messages that should never have left Sandra's inbox. The email was from Sandra to Raymond Price, dated November 10th, 2023, exactly 8 days before I had purchased my property. The subject line read, Lot 7 Timeline, and the message was brief but devastating. Harold P. is about to sell Lot 7. We need to finalize the amended plat before the new owner takes possession. The buyer will not know anything about our jurisdiction claims. Move quickly. I read the email 3 times, feeling the weight of its implications settle into my bones. This was not opportunistic fraud. This was a premeditated conspiracy. Sandra and Raymond had known that Harold Pemberton was selling the land and had deliberately rushed to create a fraudulent document before I could take ownership. They had planned to steal my property from the moment they learned it was on the market. I photographed the email, made 3 copies, and locked the originals in Derek's safe that evening. As I drove back toward my trailer with my mind still processing everything we had discovered, my phone rang from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was nervous, rushed. Mr. Blackwood, this is Timothy Banks, the contractor. I need to talk to you, but not on the phone. Meet me Saturday night, 9 p.m., at the diner on Highway 71. Come alone. Before I could ask any questions, he hung up. The call left me unsettled, but also hopeful. Timothy had seemed uncomfortable at the construction site from the very beginning. Perhaps his conscience was finally catching up with him. I pulled over near the construction site to gather my thoughts, and through my windshield I could see Sandra standing on the clubhouse steps with several board members. A banner announced the grand opening preview scheduled for the following week, and champagne glasses glinted in the evening light. $1.247 million worth of stolen dreams, built on my land with money taken from 847 families who trusted her. I watched Sandra raise her glass in celebration, completely unaware that her empire was about to crumble. Every brick, every tile, every stolen dollar would belong to me before this was over. Saturday night, April 13th. I sat in a corner booth at the diner on Highway 71, watching the door and nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Timothy Banks arrived at exactly 9 p.m., looking over his shoulder twice before sliding into the seat across from me. He was a weathered man in his mid-40s, with calloused hands and the nervous energy of someone who had been carrying a secret too heavy to bear alone. I don't have much time, he said, keeping his voice low. Sandra has her assistant monitoring my crew, and 2 of her board members have been driving past my job sites at random times. She knows I've been uncomfortable with this project from the start, and she's threatened to destroy my contracting license if I talk to anyone. I leaned forward. Then why are you here? Timothy reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. Because what she's doing is wrong, and I can't be part of it anymore. The document was an invoice dated January 15th, 2024, showing a total of $1.085 million for construction services on the Silverlake Heights Community Clubhouse. Timothy's signature was at the bottom, clear and authentic. "This is my original invoice," he said. "The real one. Sandra came to me 3 weeks ago and demanded I sign a new version showing $1.15 million instead. She said it was for accounting purposes, something about matching the budget projections. When I refused, she threatened to report me to the licensing board for code violations she would fabricate herself." He paused, his jaw tightening. A week later, I saw the modified invoice in the HOA financial records. It had my signature on it, but I never signed that document. She forged it. She added $65,000 to the total that I never billed and never received. I stared at the original invoice, understanding now why the metadata had shown the file was created in April. Sandra had not just embezzled money, she had committed forgery to cover her tracks. 2 days later, on April 15th, I woke up to discover that Sandra had launched her counterattack. The community message board for Silverlake Heights was flooded with posts warning residents about Connor Blackwood, the dangerous con artist who was attempting to steal community property through fraudulent land claims. After 11 years of Sandra controlling every narrative in the neighborhood, conditioning residents to trust her judgment without question, the community accepted her version of events immediately. Sandra had written the main post herself, complete with carefully edited photographs showing me taking pictures at the construction site, framed to make me look like a stalker conducting surveillance. The comments section had exploded with 47 responses, most of them calling me a squatter, a scammer, and worse. Someone had even posted my trailer's location, suggesting that concerned citizens should keep an eye on the suspicious outsider living on HOA land. By noon, a formal letter arrived from the HOA's attorney, demanding $50,000 in damages and immediate removal. I called Derek, my hands shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "This is classic reputation destruction," he said after I read him the letter. "She's trying to make you so toxic in the community that even if you win in court, no one will believe you. She wants you to either give up or fight back publicly so she can use your words against you." I asked what I should do. "Nothing online," Derek said firmly. "Don't respond to any posts. Don't engage with any comments. The moment you start defending yourself in that forum, you become part of the narrative she's creating. Let her think her attacks are working." Meanwhile, we build our case in silence. That afternoon, I drove past my property and saw that Sandra had added a new element to her campaign. A large sign now stood at the entrance to the construction site, reading, "Private property, no trespassing, Connor Blackwood is not welcome, my name," printed in bold red letters, displayed for every passing car to see. The attacks continued for 2 days, each one more vicious than the last. Anonymous flyers appeared on windshields throughout the neighborhood. A local newspaper received a tip about the land dispute and published a short article that quoted Sandra extensively while mentioning me only as the alleged fraudster. I felt the walls closing in, the isolation growing heavier with each passing hour. Just when the pressure seemed unbearable, an unexpected lifeline emerged. On the morning of April 17th, Walter Griffin called with news that changed everything. "I remembered something," he said. "When I refused to amend that plat map in 2019, I didn't just say no. I filed a formal rejection report with the county supervisor. Standard procedure for any request that lacked a proper legal basis. That report should still be in the county archives, and it would have Sandra Whitmore's name on it as the person who made the request." I drove to Walter's house immediately, and together we went to his garage, where he kept decades of meticulously organized records. Walter had arranged everything by year and category, each box clearly labeled with dates and subject matter, a habit born from 30 years of boundary disputes where documentation meant everything. Within 2 hours, we found what we were looking for. The report was dated October 23rd, 2019, a formal rejection notice stating that the request to amend the plat map for Lot 7. Section 12 had been denied due to the absence of a required public hearing under Texas Local Government Code, Section 2, 12.015. The requesting party was listed as Sandra Whitmore, president of Silverlake Heights HOA. Her signature appeared at the bottom of the original request form, acknowledging that she had received the rejection notice. This was official documentation proving that Sandra knew her attempt to claim my land had failed in 2019. Yet she had proceeded to create a fraudulent amended plat map anyway. I compared her signature on the rejection notice to the one on the amended plat map from 2021. Even to my untrained eye, the differences were obvious. The 21 signature looked slightly pixelated, the lines too smooth, the pressure inconsistent with natural handwriting. I brought everything to Derek, who immediately contacted a forensic document examiner he had worked with on previous real estate fraud cases. The examiner owed Derek a favor and agreed to expedite the analysis, working through the weekend to deliver results. Within 48 hours, we had a preliminary report confirming what I had suspected. The signature on the amended plat map was a digital copy, scanned from another document, and electronically pasted onto the fraudulent plat. Sandra had not even bothered to sign the fake document herself. She had simply copied her signature from somewhere else and inserted it digitally. The examiner was prepared to testify in court. That evening, Brenda called with one final piece of information. "Sandra just sent an email to all board members," she said. "There's an emergency HOA meeting scheduled for April 20th. The agenda says it's to vote on formally expelling you from the community and authorizing legal action. She's planning to make it a public spectacle." I thanked Brenda and hung up, then sat in silence for a long moment, looking at the mountain of evidence spread across Derek's conference table. The survey map from 1987, Walter's rejection report from 2019, the email from Sandra to Raymond, proving premeditated conspiracy, was accidentally included when the accounting firm auto-exported the entire vendor correspondence folder. The metadata analysis, the forged signature, Timothy's original invoice, the payments to Whitmore Realty Consulting. Everything I needed to destroy Sandra Whitmore was right here. Derek looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You have enough to bury her, Connor. The question is, where you want to do it." I met his eyes without hesitation. "At that HOA meeting, in front of every family she's been stealing from for 11 years, from April 16th through the 19th. Derek and I worked around the clock preparing what he called the destruction package. Derek enlisted 2 paralegals from his firm to help draft 3 separate legal filings, each targeting a different aspect of Sandra's fraud. The first was a civil lawsuit demanding recognition of my ownership of Lot 7, Section 12, including all structures built on the property. Under Texas Property Code Section 5.001, any fixture permanently attached to land becomes the legal property of the landowner. That meant the $1.247 million clubhouse, the pool, every brick and tile Sandra had installed on my land. All of it would belong to me once the court confirmed my ownership. The second filing was a criminal complaint alleging document forgery, embezzlement of HOA funds, and signature fraud. The third was a formal complaint to the Texas Real Estate Commission requesting an investigation into Raymond Price, while Derek and his team finalized the legal language. I continued digging through the financial records Brenda had provided. The payments to Whitmore Realty Consulting LLC had already revealed $162,000 in apparent embezzlement. But I wanted to understand why Sandra had gone to such extreme lengths for this particular project. The answer came when I searched public property records for Whitmore Realty LLC's current listings. Sandra was actively marketing 12 homes within Silverlake Heights, and every single listing included the same selling point: exclusive access to the new community clubhouse with resort-style pool. According to MLS comparable sales data from the past 18 months, that amenity added between $15,000 and $25,000 to each home's value. Sandra's commission on those 12 sales would exceed $85,000, all dependent on the clubhouse being completed. She had not built this clubhouse for the community. She had built it for herself. With the legal filings nearly complete, I turned my attention to gathering any remaining evidence that might strengthen our case. On the afternoon of April 18th, Brenda called with a discovery that made everything we had found even more damning. "I was cleaning out old files in the HOA office," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "Sandra asked me to shred anything related to Lot 7 before the meeting on Saturday, but in a legacy archive folder from our old email system, one that Sandra probably assumed no one could access anymore, I found something she must have forgotten about. An email from Harold Pemberton dated November 5th, 2023. She read me the contents. Harold had written to Sandra directly, stating that he refused to sell Lot 7 to the HOA, that the land had belonged to his family since 1987, and that he intended to sell on the open market. The email was dated just 13 days before I purchased the property. I added the email to our evidence file, feeling the final pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Sandra's conspiracy was not opportunistic. It was calculated, patient, and utterly ruthless. She had waited for an elderly man to pass away, then moved to steal from whoever inherited or purchased his land. The fact that I happened to be a geological engineer with experience reading property documents was simply bad luck on her part. Most people would have accepted her $15,000 offer and walked away, exactly as she had planned. That evening, as I was organizing the last of our evidence, my phone rang from an unknown number. When I answered, Sandra's voice came through with a new tone I had not heard before, something almost approaching respect. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm calling to make a final offer, $75,000, and you walk away from all of this. No lawsuits, no complaints, no further contact." I let the silence stretch for a moment before responding. "I'll see you at the meeting tomorrow night, Mrs. Whitmore." Her voice hardened instantly. "You will regret this. I have 847 families who trust me." I smiled, though she could not see it. "We'll see who they believe after I show them the truth." The controversy surrounding my land dispute had spread rapidly through Silverlake Heights over the past week, fueled by Sandra's smear campaign and the flyers she had distributed. What she had not anticipated was that her own attacks had generated intense community curiosity, according to Brenda. Over 312 residents had confirmed attendance for the emergency meeting, nearly triple the usual turnout. Everyone wanted to see the confrontation for themselves the night before the meeting. I sat in Derek's office with my laptop open, organizing a presentation that would expose 11 years of corruption in 30 minutes. Every slide contained evidence. Every claim supported by documents, dates, and signatures. The survey map from 1987, Walter's rejection report from 2019, the metadata analysis, the forensic signature report, Timothy's original invoice, the payments to Whitmore Realty Consulting, Harold's email, and finally, Sandra's own email to Raymond proves the entire conspiracy was premeditated. Derek watched me rehearse the presentation one final time, his expression a mixture of admiration and concern. "You know this is an enormous gamble," he said. "If they don't believe you, if Sandra manages to spin this as a desperate attack from a con artist, you will be completely isolated. No one in that community will ever trust you." I closed my laptop and met his eyes. 312 people will be in that room tomorrow. They have been paying HOA dues for years, trusting Sandra to manage their money responsibly. They deserve to know where that money actually went. Derek nodded slowly. "And if they still choose to believe her," I thought about Harold Pemberton, the old man who had tried to warn me from beyond the grave. I thought about the 847 families whose funds Sandra had stolen. I thought about the beautiful clubhouse sitting on my land, built with fraud and lies. "They won't," I said, "because every piece of evidence I have is irrefutable. County records, metadata timestamps, forensic analysis, witness testimony. None of it depends on my word against hers. Tomorrow night, the documents will speak for themselves, and Sandra Whitmore will have nowhere left to hide." The evening of April 20th, I arrived at the Silverlake Heights Community Hall at 6:30 p.m., half an hour before the meeting was scheduled to begin. The parking lot was already overflowing, cars lining both sides of the street for nearly a quarter mile in each direction. Sandra's smear campaign had backfired spectacularly. Instead of turning the community against me, it had generated unprecedented interest in the confrontation she had promised. By 7 p.m., 312 residents had packed into a room designed for 200. The air conditioning struggled against the body heat of the crowd, and people stood pressed against the walls, wedged into doorways, fanning themselves with meeting agendas. The noise of conversations created a constant hum that only died when Sandra called the meeting to order. I sat in the back row with my laptop bag at my feet, watching her take the podium in a crisp red blazer. Sandra opened the meeting with a performance that would have impressed any politician. She spoke of community values, of protecting shared investments, of the threats posed by outsiders who sought to exploit hard-working families. She referenced my name repeatedly, painting me as a con artist who had purchased fraudulent documents to steal HOA property. "Tonight," she declared, her voice ringing with righteous indignation. "We will vote to formally expel this individual from any claim to community resources, and we will authorize legal action to protect what belongs to all of us," the crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement, others exchanging uncertain glances. Then Sandra made her first mistake. According to HOA bylaws, any resident had the right to speak for 5 minutes during an open meeting. A board member pointed this out when I raised my hand, and Sandra had no legal grounds to refuse. Her smile tightened as she gestured toward the podium. "Very well, Mr. Blackwood, you have 5 minutes to explain yourself." I connected my laptop to the projector system and faced the crowd, making eye contact with as many people as possible before I began. "What I'm about to show you is not opinion," I said. "It's documented evidence from county records, forensic analysis, and financial statements that your own HOA provided in response to a legal records request. Everything I present tonight can be independently verified." The first slide appeared behind me. The original survey map from 1987, clearly showing Lot 7, Section 12, marked as outside HOA jurisdiction. This is the official boundary survey from when this community was established. My property has never been part of Silverlake Heights. The second slide showed Walter Griffin's rejection report from October 2019. When Mrs. Whitmore attempted to annex my land 5 years ago, the county surveyor rejected her request because no public hearing was held as required by law. She signed this document acknowledging that rejection. The room had gone completely silent. Sandra stood frozen at the side of the stage, her confident expression cracking for the first time. A thin sheen of sweat had appeared on her forehead despite the struggling air conditioning. I continued through the evidence methodically. The Amended Plat Map with its backdated creation time stamp. The forensic report confirming the signature was a digital copy pasted from another document. Raymond Price's role as the official who certified the fraudulent document, and his family connection to Sandra as her brother-in-law. When I mentioned Raymond's name, heads in the audience began turning, searching for him in the crowd. The financial records showing $162,000 paid to Whitmore Realty Consulting LLC with no contracts or deliverables. The modified invoice with Timothy Banks's forged signature. Each slide landed like a hammer blow. Then I displayed Sandra's own email to Raymond dated November 10th, 2023. "Harold P. is about to sell Lot 7. We need to finalize the amended plat before the new owner takes possession. The buyer will not know anything about our jurisdiction claims." Before Sandra could respond, Timothy Banks stood up from the middle of the audience. "Everything he's showing you is true," Timothy said, his voice carrying across the stunned crowd. "I'm the contractor who built that clubhouse. Mrs. Whitmore demanded that I sign an inflated invoice, and when I refused, she forged my signature. I have the original invoice right here as proof." The room erupted in chaos. Sandra's hands trembled visibly as she gripped the podium. When a board member tried to approach her with a question, she snapped at him with a viciousness that silenced even her supporters. "Don't touch me. I don't need your help." Her voice had taken on a shrill, desperate quality that made people step back instinctively. The mask of confident authority she had worn for 11 years was disintegrating in real time. What happened next sealed Sandra's fate more completely than any document ever could. In her desperation to regain control, she made the mistake of speaking without thinking. "You don't understand," she shouted over the noise. "Harold Pemberton was stubborn and wouldn't sell. That land should have been ours from the beginning. I was trying to give this community something valuable. Everything I did was for Silverlake Heights." The admission hung in the air like a thunderclap. She had just confessed, in front of 312 witnesses, that she knew Harold had refused to sell, that she knew she had no legal claim to the land, and that she had proceeded anyway. A board member rose to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in Sandra Whitmore as HOA President." The second came before he finished speaking. 287 in favor, 19 opposed, 6 abstentions. Sandra's 11-year reign ended in less than 60 seconds. But the revelations were not finished. Brenda Sullivan stood up from her seat near the back, holding a folder that trembled slightly in her hands. "I've been the HOA secretary for 6 years, she said. "After discovering the clubhouse discrepancies last week, I went back and reviewed financial records from all 11 years of Mrs. Whitmore's presidency. What I found was a pattern. Over that entire period, a total of $847,000 has been transferred from HOA accounts to companies connected to Mrs. Whitmore or her family members. The clubhouse project was just the largest example. The crowd's outrage intensified, and dozens of angry faces turned toward Raymond Price, who had been sitting near the side exit. Under the weight of those stares, Raymond rose and began pushing toward the door, his face ashen, trying to disappear before anyone thought to detain him. Sandra was escorted from the podium by 2 board members, her composure completely shattered. As she passed my row, she stopped and hissed at me with pure venom. "You think you've won? The courts will decide this, not a mob. You won't see a penny of that clubhouse." I met her eyes calmly and held up my phone. "Mrs. Whitmore, under Section 4.3 of your own HOA bylaws, all public meetings may be recorded by any attendee. I've been recording since the moment I walked in, including your confession that you knew Harold Pemberton refused to sell." I paused, letting the words sink in. "The courts will absolutely decide this. And thanks to your own words, I know exactly how they'll rule." For the first time since I had met her, Sandra Whitmore had nothing to say. 47 days after the HOA meeting, on June 6, 2024, Judge Margaret Holloway delivered her ruling in Travis County Court. Under Texas Property Code Section 5.001, all fixtures permanently attached to land become the legal property of the landowner. The court confirmed my ownership of Lot 7, Section 12, including the $1.247 million clubhouse and pool that Sandra Whitmore had built on my property. The amended plat map was declared void. Raymond Price was suspended pending criminal investigation. Sandra faced felony charges for document forgery, embezzlement exceeding $200,000, and signature fraud. She was ordered to pay $85,000 in damages to me and $847,000 in restitution to the HOA. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, but my victory was not about revenge. When the new HOA board offered to purchase the clubhouse for $1 million, I refused. Instead, I proposed a 20-year lease at $1 per year, with one condition. The HOA would establish a $50,000 annual scholarship fund in Harold Pemberton's name for local students. The vote was unanimous. On July 4th, we unveiled the Pemberton Community Center. A bronze plaque at the entrance reads, "This land belongs to the community, not to those who abuse power." Walter Griffin stood beside me at the ceremony, nodding with quiet satisfaction. Sandra Whitmore had wanted to build her empire on stolen ground. Instead, she gave me a free house and gave this community something far more valuable, a reminder that justice, patience, and evidence will always defeat corruption. Sandra Whitmore thought she could steal my land and build her dreams on it. She was wrong. If you enjoyed watching a HOA Karen lose a $1.2 million clubhouse because she underestimated the wrong person, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The HOA Stories brings you the most satisfying tales of entitled neighbors meeting their karma. New stories every week. See you at the next one.